JJ Zacharyson and I just came back from the future. We got to see the winning fantasy football teams in 2025, and we know who are on those rosters. That's the only type of information that we have for you. We are going to help you win our league by looking at the winning rosters over on DraftKings. JJ, it is DraftKings Best of Week. Thanks to our partners over at DraftKings for sponsoring us here. And I'll begin. I went to week 17. I traveled all the way up to January, and I'm coming back in time to tell you the winner of the 49ers wide receiver battle. It's not Juwan Jennings. It's not Brandon Ayuk. It is Mr. Shot Demon himself, Ricky Pearsall, who is drafted honestly quite low, 64.9 on DraftKings right now. Ricky Pearsall, a middling prospect. I actually think your stuff, if I remember correct, kind of liked him.
It did, yeah.
Very middling rookie year, a 6-game stretch where Ricky Pearsall generated 2 receptions in 6 games before blowing up in the week 17 game against the Lions. But if you look at the context of the 49ers, McCaffrey, 29, Kittle, 31, Ayuk, physically unable to perform list, Jennings wants a contract, also might have an injured calf, unclear how legitimate that is. Pearsall came off the PUP list 3 days into camp. He's been the only 49er with a normal camp who is of prime age for production. I feel like I'm going crazy. I feel like he should almost be like a 4th-round pick to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, based on what he did last year, if you look at his, he had a targets per route run rate of 0.15, which is really bad. It's just not a really strong number. There was that 3-week stretch last year where he ran like 60 some routes and only saw 1 target. And so, you can blame some of that on the fact that he got shot at the end of August and was not able to play the first month of the season. And as I've mentioned on my on the Late Round Fantasy Football show before, he was shot, whereas Brian Robinson was just shot. Ricky Pearsall was shot.
Key difference.
Not to say that being shot in any way is greater or worse, but it was a pretty legitimate situation that went on with Pearsall. So, we can definitely push aside some of the negative numbers that he saw. Final 2 weeks of the season, he averaged like a 23.4% target share. He was a top 15 wide receiver both weeks. So we saw a glimpse. But realistically, I do think, because look, I have a ton of Ricky Pearsall. I had Evan Silva on the show earlier in the week, and I guess Silva and Leone have gone back and forth a lot about Pearsall, and I had no idea that there was beef going on there in the ETR streets. But I mentioned that Pearsall was my highest rostered wide receiver. He might be second now, but he was my highest rostered wide receiver on DraftKings. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that people on DK will be so reactive to the injury tags, right?
So reactive.
So when Pearsall went on PUP, he dropped like 20 to 25 spots in ADP, and that's when I gobbled him up. Like that's when I got most of the Pearsall. But I think that we have to be a little bit vibes based with the Pearsall take this year.
You do. That's you know what? That's exactly where I landed. I was like, I can pick all these nits, but at the end of the day, he's the healthiest, youngest 49ers wide receiver. They have the easiest schedule in the NFL. I'm a believer in Shanahan. I'm a believer in Brock. I think it kind of is that simple.
Yeah, I do too. Like I liked him a lot as a prospect. I thought that he had some like Jaden Reed in his game a little bit where you can line him up all over and he can get some of the Debo looks that we not just handoffs, but like some of those behind the line of scrimmage looks that Debo got in that offense, I think could go to Pearsall too. He's really good after the catch, and he's an athletic freak. He is a great athlete. So I think there's a lot pointing in the right direction for Pearsall this year. So I'm with it. I like the pick.
Yeah, Pearsall comes back. He generates 8 receptions, 112 yards, and 2 touchdowns against the Bears in Week 17 to ship you a fantasy football championship over on DraftKings. All right, JJ, you're fresh out of the time machine. Who's on the winning roster in Week 17?
Let's start with Bhayshul Tuten, man. This Jacksonville backfield. No, first off, let's just talk about Tuten, the prospect. My model loved him. Put him in the same sort of bucket and category as both RJ Harvey and Caleb Johnson in terms of his overall ZAP score. I didn't rank him quite as high as those two guys in terms of my rankings, but it gives you a good idea of like how good this player could be. His top comp in that model was Kenneth Walker, similar size. I don't think that they're the same type of player, but definitely home run hitting ability, good speed scores based on that size. And so that's why analytically it spit that out. But I think Tuten can be an every down back. He had a pretty good receiving profile overall. And then you look at this backfield, Travis Etienne hypothetically would be the player that could be a 3-down workhorse in the offense. The thing that's really interesting for me, and I don't know if you feel this way or not, I've kind of enjoyed and liked the fact that Tank Bigsby was getting so much steam and has been getting as much steam as he has throughout this summer, because that's the player that I feel more confident of Bhayshul Tuten being able to overtake, because we've seen
He's better.
Yeah, we've seen ETN at least do things on all 3 downs in the NFL. Tank Bigsby has been horrific as a pass catcher in the NFL. And if you go back and you look, like, I like Bigsby as a prospect, but my model doesn't look at very precise, like, yards per route run stuff at running back. It looks more at volume and receiving volume at running back, and yards per team pass attempt at running back. And that obviously will come from volume. And so with Bigsby, though, you look at his yards per route run when he was in college, it still wasn't that good. You look at his yards per route run in the NFL, which is predictive for future season target share, it's horrific. Like legitimately, I could sit here and probably make the argument that Tank Bigsby over his first 2 years in the NFL, over the last 2 years, has been the worst receiving running back in the NFL, or at least
it's really bad.
And so when you combine all that, I'm like, okay, Bigsby's the dude. That means that Tuten can potentially find the field, maybe getting some easy pass catching looks. I think ETN will be that guy at least to start the year. But as the season goes on, Tuten can show off his strengths, which I think in today's NFL, when you have a player that's as explosive as him, that can generate those big plays, they become undeniable. I mean, we saw that even with like Bucky Irving last year in Tampa Bay, where eventually you're just like, okay, we cannot throw Rachaad White on the field as much as we were to start the season. And look, Travis Etienne has not been the best running back in the world. Like we might have seen it earlier on in his career, but it hasn't been there. So, do I love the Jags matchup in the final week? I don't think it's going to be like a shootout per se. But I do think there's still a chance that Jacksonville scores a bunch of points, and if Bhayshul Tuten's their lead back, then that doesn't even matter. I mean, if he's going to get volume, he's going to get volume.
Bhayshul Tuten rips off a 62-yard touchdown run to just put a victory cigar on your championship in week 17. Really couldn't agree anymore. I think there are lots of ways to play the Jaguars backfield. I've taken some Tuten on DraftKings. I've taken some ETN on DraftKings, but Tuten has been my favorite for the entirety. So I'm going to go a little bit different of a direction. Not a guy that you're going to be starting in week 1, but I'm going to go with one Mr. Isaac Guerendo, because by weeks 15, 16, and 17, our boy Christian McCaffrey, I mean, he might have to take a trip to Germany, might have to get some of that PRP injection there in his legs. One of my strategies this year, particularly on DraftKings with 20-round drafts, is I sort of aim to get one of McCaffrey, Guerendo, or Jordan James on almost every single one of my teams. Right now, Jordan James has an injured finger. Right now, Isaac Guerendo has an injured shoulder. But if I told you guys some of the names that were on the depth chart for the 49ers run, look at this, dude. You're getting names. You're getting Patrick Taylor Jr. You're getting Corey Kiner. I mean, it's unbelievable, the guys that they are bringing in there. And I think last year, the key thing is the 49ers felt comfortable using Guerendo basically in a CMC-esque role, where that was not the case when Jordan Mason was in there. He had a 4-target game. He had 3 different 4-target games spelling Jordan Mason and Christian McCaffrey for the team last year. He was super explosive. That's basically the only reason he got drafted. He was like a 9.9 RAS guy, despite being Jawar Jordan's backup and Braylon Allen's backup. Yeah. 2 guys who have not done much at the next level of the NFL. But I think we see CMC. I mean, if you made me handicap it, I would say CMC is like -117 to not be available for the fantasy football playoffs or something like that. 55% of the time he misses. Guerendo is the 1-for-1 replacement. He's gotten a lot cheaper with this shoulder injury on DraftKings. Like, you can get him in like the 14th, 15th round on DraftKings. He's a great last round pick in your redraft leagues. And I got 2 49ers here. So it's really going to be a double barreled assault with Ricky Pearsall and Guerendo, who gets the 100-yard bonus rushing on DraftKings in week 17.
Yeah, man, music to my ears. I like that game a lot. I like those offenses a lot at cost. So, I'm with it. The receiving volume is really interesting because Jordan Mason is basically a Tank Bigsby-esque type player / archetype of player. And it's been really bizarre. I know that we were talking about Guerendo, but it's been really bizarre seeing his rise in ADP and the fact that him and Aaron Jones are going like 6 spots apart now. Oftentimes, I mean, you've probably seen it too. Mason just going ahead of Aaron Jones. And I'm not like high on a 30-year-old or however old Aaron Jones is, 29-year-old running back or anything like that. But it's just an interesting, in a full PPR platform. And we know that receiving matters so much. And the fact that, Mason didn't get those looks. I mean, he had a 3% target share per game when he was starting for them last year and playing for them last year. And then, Isaac Guerendo steps in and sees more work. I mean, that's telling. Guerendo's top comp in my model last year was Isaiah Pacheco. A player who, really good speed score, really good size, really good, obviously big playability, and then like a decent enough receiving profile, right? Like, I don't think anyone will look at Pacheco as like a plus in the receiving game, but he's also probably not a
fine.
Yeah, right.
He's fine.
Yeah.
All right. Guerendo, Pearsall, 49ers, they're scoring 42 points against the Chicago Bears in week 17 to help you guys win. JJ, you did Bhayshul Tuten. Who's next, brother?
I'm going to go another rookie. Let's go Emeka Egbuka.
Yeah.
Now I will say this. I haven't bought into him nearly as much with his rising cost. From an exposure standpoint, I still think he's fine to draft. But obviously his cost has gotten like, now he's going in like that, like legit wide receiver area where there's like guys that you could see being top 15 guys pretty easily, the Calvin Ridleys of the world, or like even Waddle, you could say. But regardless of all that, still love Emeka Egbuka. I thought that he was a really underrated prospect. I famously did a podcast in May when it was the dead time of year, talking about how I did a re-roll in a dynasty league by getting rid of Rome Odunze, who, by the way, is one of my highest rostered best ball wide receivers this year, but traded essentially Rome Odunze for the 108 in a rookie draft because my worst case scenario was Emeka Egbuka, who I thought was just as good of a prospect as Odunze. And so, obviously I'm coming at this from the perspective that I like Egbuka as a prospect, but all the vibes have been horrific with Chris Godwin. Basically, if you look at the timeline of it all, like they re-sign him or they sign him to a new deal. And then the next move they make was actually, then they came out and said that he should be ready week 1. And then the next move they make was drafting Emeka Egbuka. And ever since then, it's not only been the Emeka Egbuka show, but it's also been, oh, Chris Godwin's not going to play week 1. Oh, he's not, like, we have no idea when he's going to be back. And so what I like about Egbuka, for like this kind of conversation, number one, they get Miami, who might end up having one of the worst defenses.
Like literally maybe the 32 out of 32 secondary.
Yeah. So that matchup obviously is really nice, which I wanted to like hard fade like a Baker this year, but to me, it's like just hard because of that stretch in that final game. But regardless of all that, you have an aged Mike Evans who as not, we can't assume would stay healthy. You have Chris Godwin, who is not healthy right now. There's a lot of outs for Egbuka to just kind of be the dude down the stretch this year. And I think that he's going to get production early on because of the Godwin injury. And so, in that matchup against that secondary, I'm going to take Egbuka.
I would be stunned. I do like these Mike Clay NFL projections, but I like them as a frame of reference, not just to line them up straight up. I would be stunned to see Egbuka get less targets than Chris Godwin, honestly, at this point.
Yeah.
Godwin most likely is going to be back in week 5. I think Egbuka is going to be a clear starter over McMillan. I know they kind of like McMillan, but McMillan was 1.22 yards per route run last year. We just remember him a little bit differently because he scored all the touchdowns when we needed him. But the best comps for McMillan year 1 are like Jahan Dotson, Jalen Reagor type stuff. So it's not a category you want to be in. I think Egbuka is a guy I would continue to chase up draft boards. Gets that incredible week 17 matchup. He is Ohio State's all-time leading receiver, which is kind of a fake stat, right? To some degree, because all the really good guys leave early. Yeah. But is Ohio State's all-time leading receiver. I'm going to go with depending on your perspective, a very Davis Mattek pick or a very un-Davis Mattek pick. I'm going to go the aforementioned Isaiah Pacheco. Not a flashy guy. He is a Chief. They have that matchup against Denver in week 17. I actually think, unlike in years past, that game is really going to matter for them. I expect the Chiefs to be a little bit worse this year. The defense will be a little bit worse. I think the offense is going to have to figure some things out. I guess assuming that Josh Simmons is not just the greatest left tackle in the world. But their depth chart, I mean, they really did not address the position. They brought Eli Mitchell in. He's looking like a zero. I think if you made me guess right now in early August, I think Eli Mitchell gets cut. I think Brashard Smith makes the roster as the third running back, but doesn't really play a ton. And I think Kareem Hunt is basically just who he was on the Cleveland Browns. So like short yardage, and that's it. He's not on the field for anything else. This is Isaiah Pacheco's 2022 season, which ended up, people forget, he was literally a third round pick a year ago. And then he got injured.
He started hot.
Started hot, actually was the running back 6 in expected points before he got injured. I think we know the Chiefs do want to run the ball a little bit more than in years past. I mean, we saw that last year. They kept running the ball with Kareem Hunt. So I think they're pretty dedicated to it because the deep passing stuff turns out without Tyreek Hill, your deep passing takes a pretty clear step back. I mean, I think that like the line I've been saying on shows recently is like, what's the difference between Chuba Hubbard and Isaiah Pacheco? And I think the difference is Pacheco's just on a much better team is literally the difference there. Like, he's not going to be a great receiver. He's going to contribute some. He's going to give up some goal line stuff to Kareem Hunt, but not all of it. If he runs honestly, if he just runs a little hot on touchdowns, I think he could threaten kind of a late Zeke style season where like Zeke was not fun to watch, but would just compile 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. I think Isaiah Pacheco, they wrap up the 1 seed against Denver in week 17. He gets 22 rushes, 88 yards, inefficient, but does score 2 touchdowns in that game. And he outscores a bunch of running backs who go ahead of him.
Yeah, I just don't get it with Kareem Hunt. Like, why? Like, he did not look great last year, and I mean they probably just want the security and just the floor of an RB2, which I get. And then, like you said,
he's
like
literally one of Mahomes' best friends.
Yeah, I think right now when you look at that RB3 spot, it's probably like 60-40 Brashard Smith, maybe 65-35 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I liked Brashard Smith a lot as a prospect. Like, that's my kind of running back. Really good pass catcher, comes from being a wide receiver. Had a really good rushing profile even last year when he switched to running back. So I like Brashard Smith, but I think you're right. Like, and I like the arbitrage and the comp to Chuba Hubbard, a guy that I just think has been overvalued all offseason based on the fact that, you know, he hasn't been a good pass catcher.
It's so fragile for Hubbard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, he hasn't been a good pass catcher. They bring in 2 pass catchers. I mean, they could easily, like, you know, last year he had like an 83% running back rush share. And would you be shocked if it's 66, like 2/3 this year? You know, like, would you be that surprised if Rico Dowdle mixes in a little bit more? And
you know what? I'd be stunned. Speaking of Mr. Clay's projections, I'd be stunned to see 275 rushes for him.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And that's the thing, though, is that even with, like, look at Clay's projections right here. Even with 275 rush attempts, he's still the RB17, right?
Yep.
That's the fragility. It's Kyron Williams-esque. Like, let's be honest.
Kyron Williams put on a way worse team.
Right, a worse team. I do like their offensive line. I think they should be like a decent running team, but like yeah, I mean, and I like I like Bryce Young too, from a value perspective, but like, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some fragility there where that's not as obvious in there with a player like Pacheco.
All right, JJ, take us home as we get back onto our time machine to go back where we're from. Who is the final player who is on the week 17 winning roster in fantasy football this year?
It's got to be the most boring of the 6 that we talked about, but I'll go with Trey McBride, man. He to me he's actually been an easier click for me than Bowers on DraftKings just because of the opportunity cost involved.
You can get him in the 3rd round sometimes.
Right. I mean, often, I got him in the mid-3rd in some, you know, in a draft like yesterday. And so, you know, the fact that they get Cincinnati in week 17, that's likely going to be a shootout.
Beautiful. Yeah.
You know, I still am a little bit concerned about Marvin Harrison Jr. just because nothing's really changed in that offense from like a coaching perspective and such. I like them as a prospect, obviously, but you know, I think this offense should and will likely still run through Trey McBride. Like, he's probably going to walk into a 25% target share. And again, like, on a full PPR platform, we talked about this on Becoming a Best Ball Bro. On a full PPR platform, you get a tight end that can see the amount of volume that you can see. You're lapping the field at that.
Look at these game logs, dude. I mean, this is like, crazy. If you're getting this out of your 1st round wide receiver, you're like doing cartwheels, right?
And I mean, aside from the touchdown side,
don't look at the touchdown column, but other than that,
yeah. I mean, and we know that regression is probably going to hit. Although, do we? Because McBride has literally never been a touchdown scorer.
Yeah, I mean that's the stat, right? Since his junior year of high school, Trey McBride has 17 touchdowns in
It's
8 years of
bizarre.
organized football. Senior year of high school, Trey McBride, who is dominating at the NFL level, generated 1 receiving touchdown. Now, you know the fake thing that no one ever tells you when they do that stat?
What?
I'm guessing he was probably a wildcat quarterback because this happens with all these guys who are athletic. He
Maybe.
did have 4 rushing touchdowns his final season of high school. No one ever tells you that when they do that stat, but
it's still wild. I mean, you could just look at his collegiate profile, and he wasn't scoring many touchdowns in college. So maybe it's a thing, but we know his expected touchdowns was a lot higher than 2 in the receiving column. He did have a rushing touchdown last year.
he did have no. It was not a rushing touchdown. It was a fumble recovery touchdown.
Sure.
I know that because I had an 8-leg like an 8-leg same game parlay that had Trey McBride higher fantasy points, and he wasn't going to get it. It was at the end of the game, and he recovered the fumble. But yes, 10 touchdowns on 164 receptions in college for Trey McBride. I like that one because it's a bet that a lot of Trey McBride teams get to the finals, which I think is smart drafters are probably drafting Trey McBride. It's a bet that he gets a little bit of touchdown regression, and it's a bet that the Bengals defense is horrible. So there you go, guys. Draft Ricky Pearsall, draft Bhayshul Tuten, draft Isaac Guerendo, draft Emeka Egbuka, draft Isaiah Pacheco, and draft our boy Trey McBride. And you can win $2 million playing fantasy football on DraftKings.